Hey guys, tonight we're heading into two quiet neighborhoods on opposite sides of the country. Places where you'd expect to find garden gnomes, church potlucks, and maybe the occasional neighbor who waves just a little too eagerly. You'll walk past white picket fences, hear wind chimes clinking in the breeze, and maybe, just maybe, feel a shiver under your skin you can't explain. Because tonight's story isn't about monsters hiding in forests or ghosts floating through attics. It's about the ones smiling across the street. We're talking about two people, Lucinda Rowe and Harper Davis, who lived thousands of miles apart, but whose lives brush the same raw nerve: trust. Trust in strangers, trust in friends, and how, sometimes, that trust is exactly what kills you. You'll meet Henry Cross, a retired military mechanic who knew just how to blend in. Veterans discounts, good posture, a handshake you believed in. He didn't need to chase victims, they came to him, grateful for help with the boiler or car or TV antenna. Then there's Sidney Clark, younger, meaner, not a killer at first, but jealousy makes people creative. And Harper, sweet Harper, just wanted a friend. That need opened a door that never should have been unlocked. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still with me, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's staying up with me across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start in Grants Pass, Oregon. You're walking past a modest, weather-worn house with peeling paint and 3 clay flower pots by the window. 2 of them holding actual flowers, the third full of pennies and cigarette butts. This is where Lucinda Rowe lives, or lived. She's not famous, not rich, just one of those older women you assume has always lived there. People describe her as sweet, which is what we say when we don't really know someone, but we like the way they wave from their porch. Lucinda feeds neighborhood cats, leaves extra cans on the porch just in case, buys lottery scratchers on Tuesdays, always 2, never 3. Her husband passed away in 2014. He'd been a lineman for the local power company. Since then, she's managed things herself: bills, groceries, gossip. And yet, something shifted last fall. You can't quite place it. A new truck parked down the street, beige and quiet. A man you've never seen before helping her with the storm door. He seems polite, friendly, wears a faded army mechanic's patch on his jacket. You overhear her thanking him for fixing the garden hose. Just Henry, she says when you ask. Thing is, no one invited Henry. He invited himself. Historians still argue whether small towns actually notice everything, or just the things that comfort them. Because while Lucinda's neighbors saw her with this helpful new man, no one asked many questions. He was polite. Politeness is a shield. You're standing outside her house one chilly October morning when the first strange detail appears. The mailbox is stuffed full. Lucinda never lets that happen. You knock, no answer. The cats meow like they know something's off. You don't realize it yet, but Lucinda is gone. The funny thing about true crime is how mundane it looks at first. It doesn't start with screams or sirens. It starts with expired milk in the fridge, a trash bin not rolled to the curb. And in Lucinda's case, it starts with a pension check still sitting on her counter unopened. The mailman notices. He says hello to Henry one morning and gets a chill he can't explain. Henry says Lucinda is out of town, visiting cousins. But when the mailman tries to verify, the cousins say they haven't heard from her in months. That's when the slow unravel begins. You sit with this story, wondering how often kindness gets used as a weapon. Because Henry didn't force his way in, he mowed the lawn, tightened a leaking pipe, talked about how lonely it gets after military retirement. He played the sympathy card so smoothly, you'd think he practiced it. In fact, he did. One quirky detail about Henry: he kept a perfectly folded napkin in his pocket at all times. Claimed it was a habit from mess hall inspections back in the 90s. Real or not, it gave him an air of discipline people liked. It made you overlook the fact that he never actually gave a last name. You'd be surprised how often that works. Back in 2004, Lucinda had once written a letter to the local paper about elder scams. She warned people to trust their gut. Irony is exhausting. And so, you're left with an empty house, a few unpaid bills, a cat scratching at the back door, no screams, no struggle, just absence and a stranger who says, a little too easily, "She left it all to me." You're back in Grants Pass, a few days after Lucinda Rowe's mailbox went from full to overflowing. The town hasn't panicked yet. People assume she took a late-season vacation, maybe a river cruise, maybe a cousin with a broken hip. Nobody's really sure, and nobody's pushing too hard to find out, except the mailman and Lucinda's neighbor, Carol, who notices her hydrangeas are dying. Enter the man with the khaki jacket. Henry Cross doesn't stand out. That's the point. He wears tan everything jacket, boots, pickup truck. Even his eyes seem washed out beige. You'd call him retired military, because that's what he calls himself. Served in Desert Storm. Or maybe Iraq, depends on who's asking. Either way, he knows how to fix a garbage disposal, and that's all most people care about. He's got a calm voice, not too loud. Says things like ma'am and God bless her soul, which makes you want to trust him. Because who lies with a voice like that? Well, Henry does. And often, you find out he met Lucinda at the VFW Breakfast Club. Or maybe it was the church rummage sale. Again, depends who's asking. He spotted her carrying 2 heavy bags, offered to help, then ran into her a few more times after that. Serendipity is Henry's favorite tool. The weird part, no one remembers introducing him. He just started showing up. Mainstream historians often argue that rural American communities are built on mutual memory. Everyone knows everyone because everyone remembers everything. But fringe researchers studying phantom borders in the 1980s, people who quietly took over identities, found something different. If you're just quiet enough, just helpful enough, you become invisible in the most dangerous way. That's what Henry figured out. He didn't need force, he needed familiarity. You picture him drinking instant coffee from a chipped mug at Lucinda's kitchen table, talking about his knees, how he misses his kids, how people don't visit old folks anymore. And then you imagine he offered to help her organize her paperwork. The trust fall begins. Lucinda had a modest pension, a few insurance policies, and one very tidy ledger book, handwritten, balanced, labeled in blue pen. It's the kind of thing that makes you ache with nostalgia back when people cared enough to record their lives in cursive. Henry took that book. He also took over her calls, set up forwarding on her mail, paid a few bills with her debit card. Nothing too flashy, just enough to keep her alive on paper. Now you're standing in the aisle of the local hardware store where Henry buys rat poison. Brand doesn't matter. What matters is that it's odorless, dissolves quickly. He asks the cashier about weatherproofing kits, jokes about raccoons in the crawl space. Nobody suspects the real pests live upstairs. What's particularly strange is how the town doesn't talk about Henry like a stranger. They just shrug and say, he's the one who helped Lucinda, as if kindness cancels out curiosity. That's how it goes. Right, there's even a moment. Maybe you remember this when Carol next door sees Henry loading black trash bags into the back of his truck. She waves, he waves back, smiles, drives off. The bags are never seen again. Lucinda, according to Henry, had some bad episodes and went to live in a care home upstate. He doesn't specify which one, just enough detail to quiet the room. Says he visits when he can. Says her memory's going. You almost believe it. But Carol doesn't. She starts calling around. No one has seen Lucinda. Her phone number has been disconnected. The cat is still crying on the porch. That's when Carol reports it to the police. A wellness check. Routine stuff. No sirens. No handcuffs. When they knock, Henry answers, calm as ever. Says he was just about to call. Offers them coffee. Offers them Lucinda's death certificate. You blink. Turns out the document is real, kind of. Oregon's Records Office did receive a death notice for Lucinda Rowe, dated 3 weeks earlier. Cause of death, natural causes, signed by a mobile hospice nurse named Marla Jensen. Only problem, Marla Jensen doesn't exist. At least, not outside of a Gmail address and a disconnected phone line. The handwriting on the form looks suspiciously neat, familiar. Even, you sit with that, the fact that a single piece of paper almost closed the case. Historians still argue whether the modern death certificate system is foolproof. Some say the digital trail prevents fraud. Others point out it's terrifyingly easy to fake if you know the lingo and pick a rural enough town. Henry knew the lingo. And he also knew Lucinda wouldn't be found quickly. Her backyard is surrounded by hedges. Her crawl space hadn't been checked in years. He only needed a few weeks to erase her and keep collecting her checks. What he didn't expect was the nosy neighbor and the retired mailman comparing notes. They both show up at the station independently, say the same thing. Something's off. Something smells wrong. Something about the truck, the trash bags. The way Henry always answers the phone in a whisper like he's rehearsing. So the police go back. No coffee this time. They search the house. And in the tool shed, behind a wall panel, they find the first clue. A photo of Lucinda tucked inside a Ziploc bag next to a used syringe and an envelope marked July benefits. You're still not sure what to feel because there's no body. Not yet. Just evidence of absence, an eerie quiet, and a man who says calmly, Lucinda always said she didn't want to be buried in that ugly cemetery. That's when they bring in cadaver dogs. And that's when Henry finally loses his smile. You're standing outside the sheriff's office when the news breaks. Henry Cross is in custody. No mugshot yet. No press conference. Just a blurry photo leaked to a local blog, him in that khaki jacket. Hands behind his back, face tight but somehow still polite. As if he's just been inconvenienced. As if this is all a misunderstanding. It's not. They found Lucinda, buried shallow, beneath a lilac bush in her own backyard, wrapped in a blue tarp and lined with mothballs. Mothballs, like he thought memory, like smell, could be scrubbed out with chemicals. He marked the grave with a garden gnome, and the town falls silent. People start asking questions out loud now. Did he kill her for the money, or the house, or just because he could? Turns out it wasn't the first time. Not even close. You're sitting in a small conference room with two detectives drinking stale coffee, flipping through Henry's movements over the last 10 years. He's lived in 3 states, used 5 aliases, and somehow slipped under every radar, always helping someone, always fixing something. But every few years, a woman goes missing. She's always older, always alone, always trusting. One of them, Marlene in Idaho, was declared dead without a body. Another, Diane in Northern California, was said to have moved to Phoenix. No forwarding address, but her social security checks still cashed. That's when you realize Henry didn't kill for passion. He killed for maintenance. Mainstream historians describe the post-Vietnam era as a time of institutional unraveling. Veterans coming home to little support, bureaucracies overwhelmed, records misplaced. But there's a fringe theory too, that the chaos of that period created a generation of drifters who learned how to disappear and how to help others disappear too. Henry was trained in logistics. He used to joke about it at the VA. Give me a broken axle and a bottle of bleach, I'll fix your whole life. Most people laughed. They didn't know how literally he meant it. You watch a prosecutor lay out Henry's timeline like a highway map. There's a clear pattern. Every 3 years, a new town, a new victim, each with slightly more efficiency. He always started with help, then moved to access. Then, once he controlled the bank account and the story, he erased them. It's methodical, almost gentle. And it worked until Lucinda. One quirky note in his file. He always left behind exactly one item belonging to the victim. A single shoe, a music box, a water bill taped to the fridge. Historians still argue whether that was a signature or just sloppiness. Some say he wanted to be caught eventually. Others believe it was just habit, like the napkin in his pocket. You lean toward ritual, because that's the scariest explanation. The investigators start calling it ghost boarding, not murder, but replacement. Henry didn't just kill. He stepped into lives, wrote grocery lists in their handwriting, sent thank you cards to their friends, replied to emails pretending to be them, right down to the weird spelling errors. And he fooled everyone, even the benefits system, even the hospice network, even the people next door. But there's one thing he couldn't fake. Lucinda's voice, the neighbor. Carol kept one voicemail, accidentally saved. Lucinda thanking her for pet sitting, dated 2 days after Henry claimed she died, but the voice is off slurred, dragged, trembling. Police later find out he drugged her for 2 days straight, enough to keep her breathing, enough to use her voice, just long enough to make it sound like she was alive and forgetful. That voicemail becomes Exhibit A. You imagine sitting in court, hearing that voice echo through the room, how you'd want to scream, how you wouldn't even be sure who you're angry at, Henry, or the whole system that let him become this. There's another moment that sticks with you. At the arraignment, Henry turns to the press and says, "I did what needed to be done." People forget the elderly. Then he smiles, like a teacher explaining homework, like the villain in a bedtime story who believes he's the hero. And the courtroom, for once, doesn't breathe. You walk away from that courthouse with something heavy pressing into your spine. Maybe it's dread. Maybe it's the realization that Henry Cross wasn't a shadow lurking in dark alleyways. He was the guy who brought your grandma's soup. He was the reason you stopped worrying. You think back to something small, Lucinda's blue pen. The way her ledger was always so neat, that mattered to her. It was a form of dignity, and he took it. He took everything. Still, there's one thing he missed. Back in her attic, tucked inside a sewing box, they found a note Lucinda had written 6 weeks before her death. It reads, "Henry is kind, but something's wrong. If anything happens to me, ask about Boise. Boise, the next victim. But not the last." You're holding Lucinda's note. 6 words underlined twice. Ask about Boise. It's not much. Not a will. Not a confession. Just a breadcrumb left in case someone cared enough to follow it. And someone does. The Boise Police Department reopens a file from 3 years ago. Constance Heller, age 77, widow, no children. Disappeared in early spring. Her neighbor, a retired Army mechanic named Hank, said she went to live with her niece in Spokane. No red flags, just another old woman vanishing quietly into a story no one questioned. You feel your stomach knot. It's him again. Henry Cross used aliases like playing cards. Hank, Harold, Mr. C, always vague. Always polite. In Boise, he rented a garage across from a bakery, said he liked the smell of fresh bread, paid in cash, fixed alternators, read dog-eared military manuals, and handed out free advice like peppermints. But Constance, she had a car, a pension, and a rare collection of depression glassware that Henry sold for $3,200 on eBay. Under her name, she was never reported missing. You'd think that would be a red flag. But in small towns, people leave quietly. All the time. They say things like, "I'm going to stay with family," and no one asks if family was even expecting them. Historians still argue whether that's politeness or denial. Some call it the neighbor's curse, trusting your gut but saying nothing because you don't want to seem rude. Henry relied on that. He didn't sneak in. He waved. He brought cinnamon rolls. Meanwhile, back in Oregon, the detectives are building a case. 4 victims, 3 states. One method, they call it the maintenance pattern slow infiltration. Quiet erasure. Paper trail kept just believable enough to delay suspicion. You can't help but admire how mundane it all is. One fringe criminologist compares it to termite damage. Not loud, not flashy, but when the structure falls, you realize the rot was there all along. You sit in the back of a courtroom while a forensic accountant explains how Henry rerouted Social Security deposits. You listen to a handwriting analyst break down his imitation loops. You even hear about the time he called a victim's old friend and impersonated her badly, but convincingly enough to buy himself 2 extra weeks. But the most chilling part, Henry never denied it. He confessed freely, casually. "Yeah," he told the detectives. "They trusted me. I helped him go easy." Then he added, "Better me than someone mean." That line doesn't leave you because it sounds sincere, almost like he believed it. You go over the files again. His Army record was real, but full of gaps. Psych, evals sealed. One officer wrote, "Cross displays mechanical genius, but lacks interpersonal consistency." Whatever that meant, a few incidents of misconduct. A discharge under complex conditions. Historians still argue what that means. Some say it's bureaucratic code for don't ask. So no one did. He disappeared into garages, VA clinics, halfway homes, reinvented himself with every zip code. He left no online footprint, no Facebook, no bank loans, just cash, fake names, and charm. Then Lucinda happened, and now everyone's looking backward. You pause, take a breath, because this isn't a ghost story, it's an erosion story. Trust, dissolved molecule by molecule. People who should have mattered didn't. Their lives were tidy, which made their deaths easy to fake. No kids, no mess. Just check deposits in silence. There's a fringe theory in gerontology. Some seniors don't die of age or illness, they die of invisibility. No one sees them, so no one misses them. Henry didn't invent the problem. He just capitalized on it. You think of Lucinda again? How she filled out her ledger, watered her plants, made lists. That small, sacred structure, that desire to be seen, that's what Henry destroyed. And yet it's also what got him caught. Because she wrote one note, because one neighbor noticed one cat crying too long, because one mailman remembered her laugh, the cracks widened, and Henry crossed the mechanic, the helper. The smile behind the storm door finally became what he always was underneath. A predator dressed in beige. You're waking up to the morning news muted. Slow crawl of the ticker at the bottom, and there it is. Suspected serial killer confesses to posing as elderly victims. You sip coffee that suddenly tastes cold, but that's just one story. Meanwhile, across the country, in Rowan County, North Carolina, something altogether different is beginning to fester. And it's not an old man in khaki jackets this time. It's a young woman with glitter on her eyelids, just enough fake sincerity in her voice to win your trust, and a plan so twisted it almost didn't need a motive. This is where you meet Harper Davis. She's 21, lives with her mom in a modest ranch house with faded shutters and a carport full of plastic tubs labeled Xmas lights and dad's tools. She wears oversized t-shirts, mismatched socks, and carries a purse covered in unicorn stickers. Harper has intellectual disabilities. Her teachers called her sweet-natured. Her co-workers at the community training center say she always shows up early. She loves spaghetti, dancing badly to 90s pop, and coloring books meant for kids. Her world is small, safe, and carefully managed. And then along comes Sydney Clark. You see Sydney for the first time outside the Family Dollar, leaning against a beat-up Dodge Charger, scrolling her phone like she's owed something. She's 22, sharp jawline, harsher intentions. She used to date Harper's ex-boyfriend, the one Harper never quite got over. And Sydney, she didn't like sharing the spotlight. Mainstream scholars say crimes committed by women are statistically rarer, and when they do happen, they're often rooted in revenge, control, or a desperate need to be seen. But fringe theorists, they argue there's a special kind of female cruelty that's interpersonal, built not on chaos, but choreography. Sydney was all choreography. She started small. Compliments, texts. Hey girl, I heard about you and Mason. Want to hang out sometime? And Harper, craving friendship, latched on fast. She didn't see the trap. She saw glitter. You're Harper for a moment. You're texting Sydney emojis and buying matching scrunchies. You're taking selfies. You're believing the laughter is real, because why wouldn't it be? Historians still argue whether Harper ever understood the shift, whether she felt it when the teasing got sharper, when the jokes started feeling mean, or when Sydney started filming her just little clips, but always when Harper was confused, vulnerable, or stumbling over her words. Control disguised as friendship. That's the oldest trick in the book. It gets worse. Sydney isn't alone. She brings in two others, Jade, whose only hobby is watching true crime documentaries for fun, and Kendrick, who follows Sydney like a dog waiting for scraps. They think it's a game, a prank, a way to humiliate someone and maybe get views online. But Sydney's not joking. She has a plan, and it involves a mattress. You're in the room now. It's dark, musty. They've cut open the underside of an old mattress and hollowed it out, just enough space. They laugh about it, say it's like a magic trick. Then, one night, they invite Harper over for a movie night. She brings gummy bears, wears her favorite pink hoodie. You picture her knocking, smiling, heart open wide. She never comes back out. The details that follow are awful, but we'll soften them here. Harper is drugged. A mix of over-the-counter pills crushed into a milkshake. She's confused, dizzy, doesn't fight. And then, they put her in the mattress, seal it shut, leave her there. Sydney tells the others not to worry, that Harper won't feel a thing, that they're just trying to scare her. They leave the room, turn up the music, laugh, and Harper fades. It takes weeks for anyone to figure out what happened. The police only find out because a fourth person, someone who came to one of Sydney's parties, hears something awful, something they can't ignore. And just like Lucinda's cat, just like the mailman's hunch, this little crack in the lie becomes a flood. Officers arrive. No one answers the door, but the smell is undeniable. Inside the house, they find Harper, still in the mattress, a pink hoodie, A bottle of half-melted gummy bears by her side. It doesn't even feel real. You step back and ask, why? Why her? Why that way? And the answer is the most terrifying one of all. Because they could. Because cruelty was easy. Because no one was watching. And Harper, just like Lucinda, trusted the wrong smile. You're sitting in the hallway of the Rowan County Sheriff's Department. The air smells like cheap disinfectant and worn-down carpet. Somewhere down the hall, a detective closes a door gently, like he's trying not to disturb a ghost. Because that's what Harper Davis has become. Not a statistic, not a headline. A ghost with glitter still stuck in her hair. You picture her last normal moment, probably brushing her hair in the mirror, using the purple comb she always carried. Maybe texting Sydney a heart emoji. Maybe asking her mom what movie they should watch that night before she left to see her friend. That word friend feels heavier now. The autopsy report is clear. Sedatives, minor blunt force trauma. Suffocation consistent with extended confinement. The mattress was sealed. The room was dark. The music was loud. And the people she thought liked her didn't. Historians still debate whether manipulation requires intelligence or just cruelty paired with opportunity. Because Sydney Clark didn't plan a bank heist. She didn't plot for years. She simply saw someone vulnerable and decided, why not? Mainstream media runs the story, but you can feel the unease behind their language. They don't know how to frame it. Bullying gone too far, murder among friends, jealous rage. They all fall short. Because the truth is quieter, uglier. Harper was easy to erase. You're in the kitchen, now Harper's house. Her mom is talking to reporters in short, careful bursts. She liked coloring. She always said she wanted to be a helper someday. She forgave people too easily. And then, finally, she just wanted someone to sit with her. That line stays with you. There's a frame drawing on the fridge, 2 stick figures holding hands, labeled me and Sydney. Harper drew that, probably proudly, probably after their first sleepover. The irony is unbearable, but what makes this case unravel is not just horror, it's a witness. The fourth person. Someone who was there for the drinks, thought it was all jokes, but felt the vibe shift. She tells police what she heard, what she saw, what Sydney said afterward. It's not my fault she was dumb enough to believe me. And that's it. The arrest comes quickly. Sydney Clark, charged with first-degree murder, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. Her 2 co-conspirators, Jade and Kendrick, are picked up within days. The court documents describe a premeditated act of humiliation designed to exploit a cognitively vulnerable adult. You wish they'd just call it what it is, evil. Sydney barely flinches during her booking. In the mugshot, she looks bored. She asks if her phone will be returned. She asks if the news is making a big deal of it. She doesn't ask about Harper. You learn something unsettling next. Sydney had a private group chat with her friends, named it Operation Snow Globe. They shared videos, laughed, used code names. Historians still argue whether this is a byproduct of social media dehumanization or whether cruelty has always been performative, just less documented. You scroll through court filings and find a screenshot of one of Sydney's texts. Don't worry, nobody cares about girls like her. You stop scrolling. Because that's the core of this whole story. Whether it's Henry Cross luring seniors with fake smiles, or Sydney Clark faking friendship, it only works when the world isn't looking. Harper's story begins to ripple. Candlelight vigils, colorful signs that say you mattered. Kids from the training center wear unicorn stickers on their cheeks. One little girl in pigtails stands next to Harper's mom, holding a drawing that just says, "I would have been your friend." It breaks you. And maybe that's the point. Maybe true crime isn't always about closure or justice. Maybe sometimes it's just about witnessing, about remembering people like Harper, not for how they died, but for who they tried so hard to be. She wasn't perfect, but she was kind. And in a world that so often rewards cruelty and performance, kindness is a risk, a bravery, a quiet defiance. You hope she knew that, even for a second. You sit back, let it settle, and realize these stories aren't parallel by coincidence. They're connected by absence, by the space evil needs to grow. A space left by indifference, by silence, by looking away. Not ghosts, just people who were too easy to ignore until it was too late. You're in the courthouse now. The ceilings are too tall, the lights too bright, and the rows of chairs creak like they're uncomfortable with the truth being spoken inside these walls. Sydney Clark is on trial. She walks in like she's annoyed to be there. No tears, no apologies, just the same bored smirk you saw in her mugshot, except this time, she's wearing a blazer. She clearly didn't choose herself. The press calls her cold. The prosecutors call her calculating. You call her something else entirely, but we'll keep this PG-13. Harper's mother sits in the front row, a tissue in each fist. Her jaw clenched so hard you worry it might crack. She doesn't cry. Not here. Not today. Because this day is about showing Harper mattered. That Harper existed. That she wasn't some girl who vanished into gossip. The DA starts with the texts. Screenshots appear on a monitor. Jokes, plans, phrases that read like group chat banter, until you remember there's a body under a mattress. You watch the jury squirm when they see the emoji-laced cruelty. One juror audibly gasps at a text where Sydney says, "Mattress girl is breathing too loud, LMAO." Mainstream criminology often debates the line between teenage bullying and adult-level malice. Some claim the brain isn't fully developed until 20s. Others argue that cruelty doesn't care how old you are, it just needs someone smaller than you to aim it at. You know where you stand. And so does the judge. Sydney's defense attorney tries to spin a tale of immaturity, of a prank gone wrong, of bad influence from the others. But then the witness is called. The fourth person, the one who couldn't sleep afterward. The one who left a voicemail on the sheriff's tip line that cracked this case open. She takes the stand. Her voice shakes, but her words don't. She says Sydney was giddy, that she called Harper deadweight, that she knew exactly what would happen, that this wasn't a moment of weakness, it was a campaign, and that's when something strange happens. Sydney finally reacts, not with remorse, not even with denial. She laughs, quietly, just for a second, but enough that the court reporter pauses mid-keystroke, enough that the jury sees it, and enough that Harper's mother, without a word, stands up and walks out of the room. You follow her, just long enough to see her sit on a bench in the hallway, her hands shaking. She's mouthing something silently. It takes you a second to realize it's Harper's name. Back in the courtroom, the DA wraps up with the simplest closing argument you've ever heard. You don't have to be a genius to know what cruelty looks like. The jury doesn't deliberate long. Guilty, first-degree murder, false imprisonment, aggravated abuse of a disabled adult. 2 life sentences, no parole. Jade and Kendrick get lesser charges but still decades behind bars. Sydney doesn't speak at sentencing. No apology, no explanation, and that silence is the final act of violence. Historians still argue whether silence is a form of power, whether refusing to speak is a way to stay in control when everything else is gone. Sydney seems to believe it is, but in doing so, she confirms what Harper's mother has known all along. There was never a version of Sydney that cared. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd gathers. Reporters, advocates, strangers who never met Harper but feel like they know her now. They hold signs shaped like stars. Some hold stuffed unicorns. Someone plays Fireflies by Owl City on a phone speaker. Harper's favorite song. According to her journal, you stand there a while, and maybe for the first time, Harper isn't invisible. You remember a line from a fringe psychology journal? The true opposite of violence is witness. That's what this moment is. And maybe, just maybe, it matters. You're sitting in the evidence room now. Dim lights, cold metal shelves, a faint hum from the old overhead fixture, the kind of space that smells like damp cardboard and unspoken grief. The evidence boxes are labeled by last name. One says Rowe, L. Another, Davis. You pause at Harper's. Inside, a pink hoodie, 1 glitter pen, a worn coloring book with bent pages, and a phone case shaped like a cupcake. These aren't just items, they're memory anchors. The kind of things people leave behind not because they're disposable, but because they were always meant to be used, loved, carried every day. Next to it, in Lucinda's box, a blue spiral ledger, a pair of readers, and a tin of peppermint candies she always offered guests. You pick up the ledger. Each entry is careful, deliberate, underlined. Rent, groceries, cat food. And then, March 18th. Henry said he'll help call the cable guy. March 20th. Strange voice on my phone line. March 22nd. Don't forget Boise. Each note is a whisper from the past. You wonder how many other notes like this were missed. Back in Grants Pass, Henry Cross sits in county jail. His trial is delayed. He's requesting to represent himself. Of course he is. He says he knows his own mind better than any lawyer ever could. He calls the charges overblown, claims the women were sick anyway. You're not surprised. Historians still debate whether serial offenders like Henry believe their own stories, or if they just tell them so often. They sound true. In fringe forensic circles, there's even a term for it: narrative dominance disorder. The compulsive need to be the only voice in a room. Henry has that in spades. The prosecutor prepares to argue for a death sentence, not because they expect to win it, it's Oregon, after all, but because they want the record to reflect what he did. Not just murder, not just theft. Erasure. You return to Lucinda's house. It's been sold now. The new owners repainted it sage green. The garden's been replanted. No one kept the gnome, but if you stand on the back porch, you can still feel something beneath your shoes, like the past is pressing up from below, trying to remind you it's not finished speaking yet. The neighbors say they still hear cats yowling at night, that sometimes the wind knocks over the empty flower pots, even when the air is still. And in Boise, the cold case files on Constance Heller have been updated. They exhumed a parcel of land Henry once rented. They found bone fragments, a wedding band, and a faded receipt for motor oil dated 3 weeks after her supposed relocation. It wasn't a relocation. It was a cover story. You take a moment here, let your breath slow. Because the truth is overwhelming in its simplicity, these women died because they were kind, because they were available, because someone saw their lives as soft targets and their deaths as paperwork. Henry thought he was cleaning up loose ends, but he missed something crucial. Lucinda wrote a note. Carol made a call. And now you are sitting here remembering her. That's power. You flip to the back of Lucinda's ledger and see a final line scribbled sideways in a margin. People think I'm forgettable. That's fine, but someone should know I was here. She was, she is, and so is Harper. It starts with a bird refusing to land. At first, you think it's just the wind, or maybe the bird's off kilter again. Gregor's always had a flair for dramatic entrances, often circling for far too long like he's waiting for applause. But this time, it isn't Gregor, it's Cassia, one of your newer birds. Steady, reliable, no nonsense. And right now, she's flapping in tight spirals over the chapel, cooing in an unfamiliar pattern, clutching a scroll in her leg that's already begun to unravel from the strain. You raise your arm, she doesn't come down. You whistle, still nothing. Finally, you climb onto the coop roof and hold up a bit of crushed walnut. She lands, but something is wrong. You untie the scroll and immediately see it. No seal, no string, no wax, just plain parchment, scrawled with shaky ink that reads, "The doves have turned." You blink, read it again. The doves have turned? That's it. No name, no destination, just dread. The birds around you seem off. A ripple of restlessness passes through the flock. Feathers puff, wings twitch. Even Manuel, usually stone calm, puffs once and hops to the far side of his perch. And that's when you notice it. More birds are returning with routes altered. One from Mount Auxentius meant to go northlands from the west. A monastery courier arrives carrying a scroll she shouldn't have. You double-check your tags, your strings, your notes. You haven't made a mistake. The birds have, or so you think. Then you follow a trail of droppings. It leads to the edge of the outpost, to a tiny hidden shrine built into the side of a crumbled well. One of the brothers calls it the Icon Corner, a place to leave prayers when the chapel feels too public. You've never paid it much attention until now, because inside, tucked between two worn statues of unnamed saints, are dozens of seed wrappers, unmarked, fresh, coated with a scent you don't recognize, cloying, sweet, unnatural. You pocket one and return to the coop. When you offer it to Cassia, she lunges at it, frantic, like she's starving. You test the rest of the flock. Half of them react the same way. Something or someone is training your birds to favor new locations, to change allegiance. You sit down hard on the coop threshold. It's not sabotage, it's belief. Some of the birds have started favoring shrines that are, let's just say, Controversial. Iconoclast shrines. Now, look, no judgment. You don't care whether the emperor wants gold halos or bare walls. You just want your birds to fly straight and poop outside the ledger margins. But this is different. Your birds are choosing heresy. Historians still argue whether pigeons can be trained to favor certain religious locations based on ritual scent markers. You're no scholar, but you do know birds, and these birds have been bribed. You trace it back to a novice monk named Demetrios, nervous, thin, smells like fig wine and mint sap. You catch him slipping a sugar-wrapped crumb beneath the coop gate one morning. Just being kind, he says. Kindness doesn't smell like boiled anise. You reply. He shrugs. The birds go where the spirit leads them. You report him, quietly. No punishment follows, just a transfer. He vanishes the next week. But the birds don't forget. From then on, you can't trust the flock blindly. You have to test them, routinely. You develop the scent neutrality method. You wash every coop perch in olive ash and lemon peel, scrub scroll bindings with vinegar, and stop all feeding for 12 hours before flight. It's brutal, necessary. You lose 2 birds to fatigue, 1 to a fox. It hurts, but slowly, the balance returns. Still, something nags at you. You keep that phrase in your ledger, carved beneath the ribbon bookmark. The doves have turned. It becomes a kind of mantra. Anytime a scroll goes missing, anytime a monk questions your routes, anytime a bird returns from the wrong direction, you write those words in the margins. The doves have turned. You know what it means now? It's not rebellion. It's influence. Someone learned what you already knew. Birds follow patterns, smells, rewards, repetition. So what happens when someone decides to use that to reroute the empire's veins? You stare at the flock, hundreds of them now. Trusted, trailed, watched, but never fully owned. And for the first time, you wonder, what if you're not a sorter? What if you're a puppet and someone else has the seed? You're walking down a back porch that creaks under your steps. It's North Carolina again. Just after sunset, the sky is that bruised lavender you only get in the South, quiet, humid, and heavy with regret. This is where the confession happened. The 4th person, the one who broke the story, lives here, not far from where Harper died. She didn't come forward immediately. No one ever does in stories like these. There's shame in silence, guilt in delay, and fear, so much fear that if you say something, you're inviting the horror to look directly at you. But she talked. Her name is Kayla. She's 19, works part-time at a local gas station, and lives with her grandmother, who keeps telling reporters she ain't bad, she just got pulled in. Kayla sits on the porch in an oversized hoodie, twisting a bracelet made of cheap glass beads. Her voice is thin. Her story is thick. She met Sydney through school, thought she was funny, cool, intimidating in a way that felt like admiration. Sydney gave her rides, paid for snacks, made her feel chosen. It started with jokes, then videos, then challenges. The kind you think are harmless until they aren't. Kayla admits she saw Harper once inside that room. Just once, long enough to know something was wrong. She says she wanted to help, but was told it was too late, that she'd get blamed too, that no one would believe her. She believed that until she couldn't sleep. One night, she called the Rowan County tip line. Didn't leave her name, just a message, a whisper. She's in the mattress. I'm sorry. That message cracked the whole thing open. Mainstream criminologists often say it takes exactly one person to rupture a perfect lie. Not the strongest, not the smartest, just someone who refuses to carry it anymore. Historians still argue if guilt is a moral compass or just emotional weight. Either way, Kayla dropped hers on the right desk. You sit with that. You wonder how many stories go untold because people assume their voice doesn't matter. But this one did. Police traced the call, knocked on Kayla's door. She answered in tears, gave them the address, told them about Operation Snow Globe, about the group chat, about the plan Sydney had mentioned casually. I bet no one would notice if she disappeared for a week. She wasn't wrong. But Kayla made sure someone noticed. You flip through the police transcripts and read the chilling discovery logs. Mattress found, altered, hidden inside storage room. Victims' remains identified by fingerprint and bracelet. Suspects exhibited no signs of remorse during processing. One quirky detail, Harper's bracelet sparkly pink, with a dolphin charm had the word hope spelled out in tiny white beads. Kayla later admitted she'd made it for her at a summer fair. She didn't think Harper remembered. Harper wore it every day. You stare at that bracelet for a long time. In the courtroom, when Kayla testifies, she looks straight at Harper's mother and says, "I should have said something sooner." The courtroom is silent. No reporters typing, no lawyers shifting, just that sentence held in the air like smoke. Harper's mother nods. She doesn't smile, but she nods. There's a kind of forgiveness in that moment that feels deeper than words. After the trial, Kayla disappears from the news. Probably a good thing. Some say she moved. Some say she changed her name. But one thing remains. Her voice ended the silence. She became the one who pulled the thread, who opened the door, who let the truth back into the room. That's worth remembering. Because in stories like these, people like Kayla don't get headlines, but they are why the headlines end. You're standing at the edge of Lucinda Rowe's old yard again, watching the wind stir leaves across the gravel path where Henry Cross once parked his beige truck. The house looks new now, fresh siding, bright shutters, maybe a swing on the porch. But beneath the soil, the memory still whispers. This is where the story begins to turn inward. Because once Lucinda was found, and once Henry confessed, the real unraveling began not of just what he did, but how he kept doing it. You step into the evidence room back in Grants Pass. A large whiteboard dominates the far wall, covered in strings and sticky notes, like a conspiracy theorist's vision board, only this time, it's real. Each note has a name. Each string leads back to Henry. 4 victims, officially, unofficially, at least 9. Maybe more. One of the investigators walks you through it. There's Marlene, the widow from Idaho who left for Phoenix. Diane, who supposedly ran off to Florida to restart. Teresa, whose home was sold off 2 months after she was committed. And Constance from Boise, the one Lucinda warned about. Each woman had something in common. No kids, no spouse, a modest monthly check, and a need, big or small, for someone to fix something. Henry was always nearby, with a wrench, with a story, with a slow smile that made you feel like you weren't alone anymore. Fringe sociologists call this relational grooming, a term more often used for online predators, but disturbingly accurate here. It's the slow erosion of boundaries under the weight of kindness. You forget to ask questions because you're grateful someone noticed you. You imagine Lucinda's voice again, politely insisting, "Henry's been such a help." You imagine her hesitating to ask him to leave because good people don't question good intentions. Historians still argue whether modern trust culture is too soft, whether our default should be suspicion, but that's not how most people live. Most people, especially the vulnerable, cling to the first hand offered. And Henry knew that. You flip through a manila folder marked Cross, Henry. Confession. Excerpts. In neat, all caps handwriting. He writes, "They were tired. I gave them peace. The government forgot them. I didn't." He says he did it soft. That he made their tea, held their hand, and waited for them to let go. But the autopsy reports don't match that version. Toxic levels of antihistamines, shallow graves, tape burns. The kindness was a mask. And behind it, control. One forensic psychologist notes that Henry kept meticulous logs, not of the women's lives, but of their routines. When they paid bills, when they picked up prescriptions, when they fed their pets. He needed their patterns to become his, because this wasn't just murder, it was identity theft by personality. He didn't just cash their checks, he inhabited their lives, answered their phone calls, filled out their voter registration. One victim, Roberta in Eugene, voted in a local election 6 months after she died. Henry even left online reviews as them. That's how investigators found one final clue, a glowing Yelp review for a diner in Spokane, written under Constance Heller's name, dated 4 weeks after she was declared dead. Had the meatloaf special, service was sweet as always. It wasn't meatloaf, it was Henry. You sit back, let the weight settle, because in most serial killer stories, the horror is loud. There's screaming, blood, frantic escapes, But Henry's violence was silent. It whispered through pipes and porch steps and pension deposits. It smelled like bleach. It wore reading glasses and called itself helpful. And maybe that's the scariest part, that a man can end 9 lives without ever raising his voice, that he can tuck their deaths beneath mortgage paperwork and expired pet food and nearly get away with it. The final chilling discovery comes when they unlock his storage unit in Redmond, a rusted metal trunk. Inside, 9 birthday cards, unsigned, 4 envelopes of clipped coupons, a notebook titled Next, just one name inside, a woman in Medford, still alive. They found her just in time. She says Henry was going to install a new mailbox for her next week. You sit with that, and you think whatever force in the universe caused Carol to check on the cats, caused a mailman to notice a full box, caused Lucinda to scribble, "Don't forget Boise," because that those small moments stopped number 10. You're underground now, not metaphorically, literally. In the crawl space beneath Lucinda's house, it's cramped, damp, and smells like mildew and rusted nails. The police are here with flashlights, kneeling in the dirt, their beams cutting through webs and silence. And then they find it, not a body, not a weapon, a boot print, half buried in the mud, size 11, military tread. It matches the pair of surplus combat boots found in Henry Cross's truck, the same boots he wore when helping Lucinda check the furnace. It seems like a minor thing, this boot print, but in cases like this, it's never about the size of the clue, it's about placement. No one had any business being down there, not unless you were hiding something. And Henry, he hid plenty. You're standing next to a forensic tech now, reviewing recovered items from that crawl space. A rusted tin with teeth marks. An empty pill bottle labeled with a false patient name. And a small, taped cassette. Yes, a cassette, because Henry was old school. He didn't trust phones. Said once in an interview that the cloud's just a fancy attic for the government. The cassette is labeled CR7. No one knows what the 7 means, but when they play it, you hear Henry's voice reading from a list. A list of women, names, birth years, notes like still sharp, arthritis, talks too much. And then, after some entries, complete, you feel your spine tighten. This wasn't random. This was tracked. Mainstream historians often say serial crimes are impulsive explosions of rage or opportunity, but a growing field of forensic behavioral science disagrees. They say there's a new class of offender, calculated caretakers, people who build trust before crossing the line, who don't kill because of passion, but because they've already mapped the aftermath. Henry mapped everything. You're back in the evidence room again. Investigators are compiling timelines, color-coded, layered, and something emerges, a strange consistency. Every time Henry assumed a new identity, he made one small mistake. He mailed postcards, not from himself, from them. Lucinda's cousin received a card after her death, having a nice time. The cats are fine. Another family in Boise got one from Constance, dated a week post-mortem. Don't worry about me. Just breathing easier. And that phrase, just breathing easier, repeats 4 times. Some investigators think it's Henry's sick little wink. Others believe it's a leftover from one of his victims. Maybe something they once said that he copied, like a phrase from a recipe card. Fringe criminologists call it linguistic leakage, when a killer can't help but leave a fingerprint in phrasing. Like a signature no one sees until they look sideways. Henry's sideways. Always has been. You step back and look at the big picture again. 9 names, 1 trunk, 1 crawl space, a garage in Boise, a ledger in Grants Pass, a cassette with whispered names and sighs, and one terrifying realization. None of these women screamed. They didn't fight back. Not because they were weak, but because they trusted him. Because the poison was slow. Because his voice was calm. Because he probably held their hand while they drifted into silence. That's the part you can't stop thinking about. The part that gets under your skin. The idea that someone could kill with comfort. You remember one of Henry's old neighbors saying he used to hum when he worked on cars. You wonder if he hummed while he stirred the pills into tea, if he wiped the cup afterward, if he made the bed, because that's the kind of monster Henry was. Not fangs, not fury, but folded towels, unlocked doors, a ride to the pharmacy, a kind word before the end. And in the darkest part of your mind, you wonder if no one had looked closely. If Lucinda hadn't left, That one note would you have smiled at Henry, too. You're sitting on a porch swing in Rowan County, North Carolina. It's a week after the sentencing. The air is thick with humidity, and cicadas scream in the trees like they've been holding their breath for months. Across from you, Harper Davis's sister, Janelle, watches the sun set with a stillness that feels like armor. She's 27, a nurse, and the kind of person who only cries behind closed doors because the world has never given her permission to fall apart in public. She hasn't spoken to the press, not once. But she's talking to you. She just wanted to be seen, she says. Her voice is soft, but there's steel underneath it. She wasn't stupid. She was just open. And people think that's the same thing. You let the silence hang. She needs space to remember. Harper was the youngest, born late, when their mom was already dealing with a sick husband and bills that never stopped piling up. Janelle did a lot of the raising. Taught Harper how to use the microwave, how to tie her shoes, how to press the crosswalk button and wait. Always. Wait for the green light. She followed rules. Janelle says, too many rules, and Sydney used that. Historians still debate whether children with intellectual disabilities are overtrusted or overprotected. Most experts agree. It depends on the world around them. And Harper, she was raised in a town that said the right things but never really showed up. She was sweet, Janelle continues, but not soft. You know what I mean. She liked things her way, liked her stickers in rows, her soda with ice, her TV on the same channel every night. You smile a little. You can see Harper now, that quiet defiance wrapped in rainbow hoodies and glitter. She loved Sydney. Janelle adds, I don't mean romantically, I mean trusted. The way a puppy trusts the person who feeds it. And Sydney, she played into it, leaned into it, made it feel safe. You look out over the yard. A small wooden post holds a wind chime Harper made in art class, forks and keys, and bottle caps strung together with pink yarn. It clinks softly in the breeze. That thing drives me crazy, Janelle says with a half laugh, but I'll never take it down. You ask her what justice means to her now. She shrugs. I don't believe in it. Not really. I believe in memory. I believe in people not forgetting who she was. And so, she tells you stories. How Harper used to call the weather sky moods. How she named every spider in their house, Donna. How she once got so mad about a broken marker that she buried it in the backyard like a funeral. You laugh. You cry a little, too, because these are the things that don't make the headlines. These are the things that make a person. You learn that Harper kept a diary, bad spelling, backwards letters, and all. Janelle reads one entry aloud. It's dated a few weeks before her death. Today, I am happy. I saw Sydney at the store. She smiled at me. I think we are friends now. She said she likes my hair. I told her she is pretty. She laughed. You feel that sentence hit your bones. Because when you read it now, you know it was the beginning of the end. Fringe scholars sometimes say that trust is a form of time travel, that when you trust someone, you're projecting your future safety into their hands. Harper did that, willingly, repeatedly, and Sydney crushed it. You thank Janelle for her time. She nods, then hands you a drawing, something Harper made the week before her death. It's two stick figures holding hands. One is labeled me, the other is labeled someone nice. Janelle says Harper didn't finish it, didn't name the second person. Maybe it was Sydney, but maybe not hopefully, not wishfully. Maybe it was someone she hadn't met yet. Someone who could have been kind. Someone who could have filled that empty chair at the coloring table. Someone who would have stayed. That's what Harper wanted. Not attention, not pity, just a seat at the table, a friend to eat gummy bears with, a friend who didn't need her to be anything more than herself. And now, it's up to the rest of us to remember that. Because when you tell this story, when you say her name, when you keep that wind chime clinking, you keep Harper alive in the only way that matters now. In memory, in witness, in the refusal to look away. You're sitting in a worn wooden chair at the back of an Oregon courtroom. It's cold, too bright, and smells faintly of lemon cleaner and aging paper. The bench beneath you groans like it's tired of holding so many stories. Today, it holds Henry Cross. It's been 2 years since Lucinda's disappearance first raised an eyebrow. 2 years of tracing aliases, reopening cold cases, following paper trails through pensions and poison. And now, it all leads here. Henry is brought into the courtroom wearing the standard orange jumpsuit, though his posture still screams military. Back straight, chin tucked, hands folded. The court clerk calls the case State v. Henry Cross, 9 counts of murder. He doesn't flinch. You expect outrage. You expect chaos. Instead, what you get is something colder, calculated detachment. He doesn't look at the gallery, doesn't glance at the exhibits. He listens like he's watching someone else's movie, interested, but unaffected. When they present the cassette tape with his own voice reading the names, he looks bored. I was helping, he says during cross-examination. They were going anyway. I made it cleaner. You hold your breath, because that's it. That's the full defense. Not insanity, not innocence, mercy. Historians still argue whether killers like Henry are delusional or deeply pragmatic. There's a fringe theory in forensic psychology that some murderers develop a caregiver complex, convincing themselves that ending a life is less cruel than letting someone decline. That theory never sat well with juries, especially not this one. Especially not when prosecutors show the photos Lucinda's garden, Constance's storage unit, Marlene's empty room with the turned-down bed, and a birthday card unopened on the table. You're handed an old psychiatric file, declassified. Inside, notations about control behavior in early training, suspicion of identity disorders, an incident in '97 involving unauthorized end-of-life protocol. Henry was discharged, but not dishonorably. They let him go quietly, just like his victims. You lean into the chair's creak and feel the weight of that phrase. They let him go. Because systems fail more often than people do. Because paperwork stacks higher than questions. Because when someone sounds calm, wears a patch, and knows how to fix a boiler, we tend to nod and move on. The prosecution's closing statement is simple. Henry Cross didn't find his victims. He was sent to them through 1,000 tiny cracks in oversight, in apathy, in polite silence. They rest their case. The jury deliberates longer than you expect, 12 hours. One juror weeps openly in the hallway. She says, "He reminded me of my uncle." Another says, "It was like he wanted to be thanked." But they come back. Guilty, on all counts. The judge sentences him to life, without parole, stacked end to end. Henry doesn't blink. He requests to speak. Permission is granted. You brace yourself. He clears his throat, looks out at the courtroom, not with apology, not even with defiance. Just that same eerie, neutral tone. I did what needed doing. They were forgotten. I remembered them. I was the only one. And then he thanks the judge for the courtesy of a fair hearing. Not once does he say their names. You leave the courthouse, sunlight hitting your face like a foreign object. The crowd outside is sparse. A few reporters. One man holding a handmade sign that just says, "She paid her bills." That's all. You stop. Because that's the truth, isn't it? Lucinda didn't do anything wrong. Neither did Marlene, or Diane, or Roberta. They lived quiet, structured lives, and someone decided that made them easy. You remember a line from the psychologist's report? Offenders like Cross don't act on impulse. They act on the assumption that no one will ask follow-up questions. But someone did. A mailman, a cat, a neighbor, a scribbled note. And now because now you know their names, their routines, their endings. And that matters more than you think. You're back in North Carolina for the final time. The courthouse looks smaller now, not physically, just emotionally, like all the weight it held during the trial has drained out through the marble cracks and courtroom chairs. Sidney Clark has already been sentenced. 2 life terms, no parole. But that's not why you're here. You're here because the town of Salisbury is holding a vigil, months later, and somehow it feels even more important than the sentencing ever was. They're calling it Harper's Light. You walk into the community center where Harper once did job training. It smells like cheap coffee and folding chairs and glue sticks, like a place where people try hard with what little they have. The room is full. Over 100 people, most of them wearing purple, the color Harper loved most. Her name is on the wall. Glitter letters, Harper. You catch sight of her mom standing near a table covered in stuffed animals, coloring books, and a guest book filled with shaky handwriting. I wish I had known her. She reminds me of my sister. You mattered. There's a boy, maybe 10, taping up a hand-drawn sign that says, "I would have been your friend." You don't cry, but it's hard not to. One speaker reads from Harper's old school evaluations. Lines like, "Likes to help others. Struggles with sudden change. wants very much to be liked. Each one lands like a stone in your chest. There's a brief moment of silence, and then something extraordinary happens. They light the candles, but not just one for Harper. They light one for every victim like her. People with disabilities, people manipulated, overlooked, dismissed. Names you've never heard, stories that never made it past the second paragraph of a local news site. Historians still argue whether memorials are for the dead or the living. Some say it's ritual. Others believe it's how we rewrite the ending, not to erase the tragedy, but to reclaim the narrative. You stand among them. A soft glow of candlelight reflects in every eye. Harper's mom steps forward, and she doesn't read a prepared statement. She just says, "Please be kind to the quiet ones. Please protect the ones who trust too easily." The room doesn't clap. It just exhales. You look around and realize Harper has become more than a girl in a headline. She's become a symbol of what happens when cruelty is allowed to grow unchecked. When people play God in bedrooms and basements, using power like a scalpel. But more importantly, she's become a symbol of what it looks like when people show up. Outside, it's dark. Still, one of those Carolina nights where even the trees seem to hush. People leave slowly, some hugging, some silent, some still holding candles like they don't want the night to end. You pause at the memorial table one last time. There's a new item there now, a small plush unicorn, its fur a little worn, with a note attached. To Harper, "I didn't know you, but I will never forget you. Love." Someone who sees you now. You step back, and in that moment, you understand something simple and profound. Justice is paperwork, but memory is armor. And Harper, once invisible, once written off, is now armored in the one thing that can never be taken again: witness. You're walking through the halls of a government building in Salem, Oregon. The walls are lined with faded portraits of politicians, bronze plaques, and that dull echo only government carpet can produce. But something new has been added: a bill proposal, Lucinda's Law. It's still in committee, but it's real. Named in honor of Lucinda Rowe and designed to tighten identity verification for Social Security beneficiaries over age 65, it adds mandatory wellness checks for sudden change of benefit requests. More red tape. Yes, but the good kind. The kind that stops people like Henry Cross from slipping through cracks already lined with silence. You sit through a reading of the proposal. One state senator says, "Lucinda didn't die because she was old. She died because someone counted on no one asking where she went." Another adds, "Let's make sure nobody gets erased with a polite smile and forged handwriting ever again." It's not sweeping reform. It's not national, but it's something. Meanwhile, across the country, you find yourself reading a syllabus for a class at a community college in North Carolina. The title: Media Literacy and Moral Courage. Lessons from the Harper Davis case. The instructor includes excerpts from Harper's diary. Asks students to write about power, friendship, and the cost of indifference. One student's essay ends with a sentence you can't stop rereading. Evil doesn't always knock. Sometimes it just smiles and asks if you need help carrying your groceries. You sit with that because both Henry and Sydney use the same disguise: charm, attention, familiarity. The difference was age, geography, motive. But their tactics, chillingly similar. They exploited loneliness. You walk out of that college and glance up. There's a mural on the side of a brick wall. Harper's face, done in gentle purples and soft brushstrokes, eyes bright, lips in mid-laugh. Below it, "You still matter. I still see you." You think about Lucinda's attic note, Harper's bracelet, the cassette tape with names, the confessions, the silences, and suddenly, all of it feels linked not by horror but by the people who refuse to look away. The mailman, Carol and her cats, Kayla and her voicemail, Janelle and her porch swing. And you, yes, you still listening. You remember a line from a fringe philosopher: "We keep the dead alive by giving their stories somewhere to land." And tonight, that place is here. The wind down begins as you walk away from both courtrooms. The vigil ends, the candles burn down, but memory, like soft ash, settles in layers on your pussy, your shoulders, on your breath, on your bedtime thoughts. Let it settle, because tonight's journey took us through 2 lives, 2 ends, 2 predators, but also through 100 small acts of remembrance. A note in a ledger, a whisper in the dark, a wind chime that never stops ringing. A name spoken out loud softly, but clearly. Lucinda, Harper, they were here. They mattered, and they are not forgotten. So now, as we ease out of tonight's story, I want you to let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of the blankets over your legs. Notice the quiet hum of your room, the soft flicker of your nightlight, or the pale shape of curtains drifting in the breeze. Let your eyes soften. Tonight, you've been a witness to darkness, yes, but also to light, to resilience, to the strange, quiet heroism of noticing, of remembering, of saying someone's name even when they're gone. You don't have to fix the world tonight. You don't have to be the detective, the neighbor, or the voice on the tip line. Sometimes, it's enough to hold the story, to make space for it, to carry the memory forward into tomorrow gently, but intentionally. Think of Lucinda's neat handwriting. Think of Harper's glitter pen. Think of a wind chime made of forks and keys, moving softly in the dark. Let those be your closing thoughts. Let them settle you. And if any part of tonight made you pause, if it stuck to your ribs like truth often does, just know that means your heart still works exactly as it should. Now close your eyes. The world will still be here tomorrow, and so will the memory of the quiet ones. Good night.